Do you have a favorite planet other than Earth?
Yeah. For me, it would be Jupiter. And I think for a lot of other people who like or observe planets, it's Jupiter. And that is because of how dynamic Jupiter is.
Really?
Because yeah, it's so dynamic. Like it can almost change from usually from week to week, but if you're really lucky, maybe from day to day. Yeah. So I'm talking about like the clouds and the way it's moving on Jupiter. So I
Okay.
think for those who are familiar, it's like there's the Great Red Spot. And if you observe the Great Red Spot, it can change over the course of a few months. And as gases, hit the Great Red Spot and causes, vortices to come off the Great Red Spot and things like that, you can see storms building or storms, subsiding. It's really cool. Like you can see a lot of the gases mixing in Jupiter. And that's why I really love this planet, because every time you look at Jupiter, you don't really know if you're going to see something new. Like there's always a chance you might see a storm, which, with some kind of like a small little cyclone. And you might be the first person in the world to see that storm. Yeah. And that's really
Wow.
cool. Yeah. Because perhaps no one else was observing Jupiter at that very moment. So you might see something building up. So that's why there are like communities online dedicated solely to observing Jupiter. And they will share their
Really?
images of Jupiter saying, okay, today I've observed Jupiter, and then there was like a storm that's building, or like there was a little uh, storm coming off the Great Spot, and things like that. Yeah. And the other cool thing about the Great Spot is that it's actually shrinking with time. So over the years, as I've observed Jupiter every year, I've I've noticed, and obviously everyone else has to, that the Great Red Spot is shrinking.
Really?
And yeah, and some years it actually gets a bit bigger. So back in 2019, it was really small, like really small compared to 2017. And then now in 2021, that was the last year. Yeah, it's come back to its normal size. So it changes a lot.
So what
And
is
and,
the
and
spot?
yeah, it's an anticyclone actually, which is just like a tornado, a cyclone, a big storm, a huge storm that could fit a few Earths into it in terms of the size. So it's really, really big. Like we talk about hurricanes and stuff like that on Earth,
Yeah.
but no, this is a storm which is like 3 or 4 times the size of Earth. Yeah. So it's like this
Wow.
huge whirlpool that's just going around. Yeah, it is pretty cool. And the cool thing is also that on planets, like especially on Jupiter, you can actually see the color. So the Great Red Spot actually appears quite reddish. I mean, it's more of a brownish kind of red, but
Okay.
yeah, you can see it's reddish. Like all my pictures of Jupiter and Saturn, they are processed to make. I try to process them in such a way that you can actually the color is representative of what you see in the telescope itself.
Oh, wow.
So there is a whole bunch of colors which you actually see in the telescope. And that's why I just love Jupiter. It's just like so much going on.
Wow.